Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. Our guest today is the Director of British Council Taipei, Christine Skinner. Ms. Skinner, we've been talking about how to promote culture overseas. But for some people, they call it cultural diplomacy. Even they call it propaganda and things like that. Do you think that's the case?
I wouldn't want to work in that kind of in propaganda or cultural diplomacy. Certainly, what we do, cultural relations. Well, some people say cultural relations is part of public diplomacy.
Yeah.
Some people say that public diplomacy is part of cultural relations. And I prefer the second. I think that public diplomacy is actually a small part of cultural relations. And cultural relations include all sorts of cultural exchanges, and not necessarily the cultural exchanges that fit within some particular message that the government is wanting to promote about the UK or any country.
Yeah.
We do a lot more than that.
That's right. But what are the primary goals of promoting cultural understandings across borders?
What are the goals? Why do we do it? Yeah, I know. This is the thing that I ask myself every morning when I wake up.
Right.
Why do we do this?
That's right.
Because I think that people are just so amazing when they are being creative. I think creativity is just an excellent vehicle for people to build relationships. And you've got this wonderful product, the one I was talking about before with Akram Khan, for example, where people get together and because they are from different cultures, they start thinking completely new things, and the challenges are completely unexpected. And so the creative product that you get is just completely new. And I think that's a really good example of how, diversity and different cultures, when they come together, something magical happens. And they do the unexpected.
But apparently there are also some difficult parts in promoting cultural exchanges. Do you feel any frustration at all, while you're working in this field?
I can tell you lots of stories. I can tell you lots of stories. It can be quite difficult. Artists are not the most, they're not the easiest people to work with, and I've had some very interesting experiences of working with artists. Especially when you have artists who've got fixed ideas about exactly what they want to do, or, are continuously... Artists do tend to push the boundaries, so, just when you think they're satisfied, they're wanting more and more and more. So it can be quite difficult. But I feel that I've learned an awful lot from working with artists. There's striving towards perfection is something that artists try to do, always trying to find something better than anything that's ever been done before, which can be very challenging for everybody who's working with you. But then if we didn't do that as human beings, we would become very static, and really that life force would just not continue. So culture is just essential. I mean, it has to be there. So I think, sharing cultural experiences between nations, between cultures, is an essential part of our communication.
That's right. And what would be the most self-fulfilling part of this job? Most interesting part, most fulfilling job you ever had?
There have been so many experiences. I mean, I really have been very lucky. I mean, it's always great when you see the final results. The final results when you've got, if you've gone through a very long and difficult process of, getting artists to work together, or finding opportunities for artists, or supporting an artist to do his or her work in a culture that they don't know very much about, and then they succeed, and then they produce the final piece of work. But sometimes it's not, the product is not the thing. Sometimes it wouldn't really matter if there was no product. It's the whole process of cooperation, and it's the relationships that are built along the way. And I just love to see people being creative together. And when people get into that state of, we call it in English, we call it flow. When you're enjoying yourself so much that time kind of goes into another dimension. That's really quite magical. That you can see that happening when people get very excited about a piece of work, and then the process just completely takes over.
As I said at the very beginning, that some people worry that with this globalization process, there will be more contests of cultures, but there are also concerns about conflicts of different cultures. And what's your take on that?
Yes, and throughout history that has been the case, you know, where cultures are not always living in harmony, are they? You know, sometimes we can know far more about a culture that is thousands of miles around the globe, know more about that culture than, you know, the nation that's right next door.
That's right.
So, yes, there are conflicts in the world, and I think that, you know, the role of public diplomacy, you mentioned public diplomacy before, but I think the role of public diplomacy, and public diplomacy as part of cultural relations, has become more valued, especially since 9/11, where it was obvious, I think, after that date, that something was going wrong, that something very serious was going wrong in the way that cultures were actually meeting, and that the misunderstandings were getting intolerably big, and that something really did need to happen. For the organisation I work for the British Council, the realisation that culture was an or culture and education, so culture in its broadest sense, is a good way of helping people to develop an understanding of each other, has really been a tremendous change in the organisation. A lot of the British Council's resources now are actually diverted into the Middle East, into the Islamic world, which is excellent. And the British Council is doing some excellent work in the Middle East. We do have an office in Iraq. We do have an office in Afghanistan. Our office in Indonesia is doing some fantastic work in this region at building greater understanding, really, you know, between different faith groups.
That's right. But apparently the cultural conflicts could happen not just across borders, but also within or inside the borders, you know, especially when in a country with the different cultural groups and so on. And how do you overcome, apparently your country is a country with a different diverse cultural groups living all together inside your country. How do you overcome these kind of cultural gaps among different groups?
I think education is very important, actually. I really do think education is very important. We have not always had harmonious relationships between races in the UK. In the 1950s, we had a huge influx of people from the Caribbean, from the Indian subcontinent, and from Africa. And a lot of those people, I'm ashamed to say, as a British person, a lot of those people did not have a great time when they went to the UK. They went there for a better life, to work and to bring up their families, and were treated quite badly when they first went out. And that is something that a lot of British people like myself feel really bad about. I am happy to say that things are much better, but that has been a long process of education, of different groups of people getting used to each other. I'm not saying that the UK has got it right, but in general there is a feeling of successful diversity in the UK, and there are very often flashpoints too.
The reason I'm asking that question is because Taiwan is a colonial society, and there are people from different countries coming to Taiwan to work, to live, and to marry, and so on. So it's now become a very diverse cultural society. And I'm just wondering whether there's anything that we can learn from your experiences in the UK.
I think that the education system is very important, and I know from my own experience in Taiwan that this is something that the government is seriously considering. We were involved in a conference last November, which was on the theme of ethnic diversity in education, and using the UK's experience. We've had a growing diversity in our schools and in our society since the 1950s, so that gives us 50 years basically of experience, which counts for a lot. So I think, you know, my experience of working with British experts is that they don't mind telling you about the problems they've had. And we have had some serious problems. It hasn't been easy.
But you have to face the problems first before you try to understand and try to resolve the problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. And education and basically, government policy has been very important. And really the worst thing that you can be in the UK these days is a racist.
Yeah.
Nobody likes a racist. It just is not tolerated.
Yeah.
But that comes out of, basically, kids at school. And so you've got this interesting situation,
That's right.
of kids who will be telling their parents off, hey, Mum, Dad, no, this is not the right kind of attitude to have.
Okay. And like the UK, Taiwan is also trying to promote our cultures abroad. And from a foreigner's perspective, do you think that Taiwan has been doing a good job in terms of promoting Taiwan's image and promoting Taiwan's cultures abroad?
I think that Taiwan could do a lot more because you've certainly got an awful lot to share. I've really enjoyed all of the cultural events that I've attended here have been fantastic. I mean, Taiwan is a very creative place, and you have some very talented people who are long established. And I'm thinking about people like Cloudgate and Youth Theatre and Kuan dancers and many, many more. I know that I'm only scratching the surface, really, and fabulous institutions, like the Taipei Artist Village and wonderful gallery space.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot to show off about. And I knew because I work in the British Council, I knew colleagues who worked in Taipei. I knew that Taipei in particular, but also now I know Taichung and Kaohsiung are really cool places for arts.
Yeah.
But I don't think the world knows, and I wonder
That's
why
right.
you're not telling people about this.
And
You've got an awful lot to share.
Okay, but as we know that our government has been trying to put a lot of resources in the so-called cultural innovation industries and so on. And the problem is that it appears to me that many of the local groups or artists and so on are more inward-looking than outward-looking. And they try to go internationalized, but they don't have the capacities and so on. What does your government do to help your local groups, artists and so on to go abroad?
We don't particularly help them to go abroad. I mean, what we do have is a very dynamic Arts Council. In fact, we have an Arts Council for all of the UK countries. So there's Arts Council Wales, Arts Council Scotland, Arts Council England, and another organisation in Northern Ireland. And those act as funding bodies, so they will actually give grants to artists. Whether those artists use those grants to go abroad is up to them. The Arts Council actually in England does fund some British artists to come to Taiwan, 3 every year, come out to Taiwan, and they work for 3 months in the Taipei Artist Village. But for many artists, for young artists, getting a small grant like that can be the start of a career. And a few years ago I worked with the very well-known British artist Anthony Gormley in China, where we did a piece together called Asian Field, which was fabulous. And I got to know Anthony very well and was very surprised to learn that he had also started his career with an Arts Council grant of £500, which is, it's not even £500 is about 3,000
kgs.
Yeah.
It's quite big. And as a director of the British Council, you came here last year, and apparently you're hoping to accomplish something, right? So what would be a primary mission, or you are hoping to accomplish while you are serving here in Taiwan?
What would I really like to do? Well, I'd like a lot more people to know that the British Council is here promoting cultural exchanges. I would certainly like to see a lot more people coming and visiting and getting involved in our work, coming to the education exhibitions, and visiting our website. So I'd like a lot more people to engage with us. We will continue doing the exchanges and things that we're doing. But I would like a lot more Taiwanese people to get involved and to communicate with us, check out our website, pop into our office, talk.
Some people still confuse the British Council with the BTCO, right?
Oh, I know. I know. BTCO is government. It's the embassy equivalent, basically. And the British Council is not government. We're an NGO. We're a registered charity in the UK, receiving a bit of government money. We're great friends with the BTCO, having said that, and we do work together, but only sometimes, not all the time. We are quite separate. We have separate budgets, separate management. That's the way it works.
So look to the future where there'll be more cultural groups coming from the UK in the short period of time?
I hope so. I hope so. We've got a big exhibition happening in October, which will focus on design, and we'll have lots of British designers coming out. And British companies are helping us with that. So Marks and Spencer's, for example, who we're very happy are coming out to Taiwan, will be giving some funding support. Diageo will also be giving some funding support. So we'll be showing off a lot about good British design in October.
Yeah, thank you for coming to our program and wish you a big success here in Taiwan.
Thank you very much.
And that's Christine Skinner, Director of the British Council, Taipei. And thank you for watching Taiwan Outlook. See you next time.